Hello again, everybody. It's your old Uncle Jeff again with another vlog about childhood in Olivia. I hope you're having a fun day because I had a lot of fun putting this one together. We'll go back to when Brent and I became independent, getting the trainer wheels off our little bikes so we could ride around town. He was riding his little two-wheeler when he was in kindergarten, and that's when I was in first grade. I still had my trainer wheels on. I had seen what he looked like when he fell off his bike, and I wasn't quite ready to take those wheels off right away. But in the spring of first grade, I came home one day, and my new dad, Pete, had taken the wheels off, and I thought, uh-oh, this is it. And he said, here, get on and let's try this out. And he held the back of it and ran me down the driveway and out the alley, and I heard him running behind me, and so I was pedaling as fast as I could, and finally I realized he wasn't holding on anymore and I was going. So I had to make a left around the corner at the end of our block because the street didn't go through, and I kept going until I finally kind of came to a stop at the curb in front of the Pushing's house, and Brent came out and he was glad to see that I'd survived, and I got back on the bike, and Dad pushed me again and I was off riding. So this meant we could move around. One of our favorite things to do back then was to take a picnic out to the end of the golf course, which was across the street from our houses, and about a quarter mile away there was a well at the end of the golf course where you could get a nice fresh drink of water and put water in the ball washer and get the grass stains off your balls. So we would take a bag of the Pushing's golf balls out there and pack a lunch in our matching lunch pails. Brent always took sandwiches his mom liked to make out of brown sugar, and I usually took a peanut butter and jelly made by either mom or whoever the summer babysitter was then. We'd go out there and have chocolate milk in our thermoses and have our picnic and fool around, go in the cornfield behind there. And one day the kid across the street, Dougie Hart, said, you know, your mother is standing on the corner by the Vadheims with the binoculars watching you when you're out there. So immediately Brent said, okay, next time we go out there, let's pull our pants down and show her our bottoms. And even though we didn't know what mooning was, we sort of invented mooning for us, so we did that each time we went out there just to see if she'd ever say anything, and she never did. So I guess we got by with that. The next thing we did was we decided we were going to become bird undertakers. Brent's brother Todd made model planes, and they would go up in the air and come down and crash, and he was forever redoing everything. He made these little control boxes out of balsa wood, and when he was done with them, he'd give them to us to play with. Well, they were about the size of a bird coffin, so we strapped this on the back of a regular hand-pull golf cart, tied it to Brent's bike, and went around town picking up all the dead birds we could find. Then we went to Pushing's gravel area in their backyard, buried each bird, took a piece of broken flagstone that they had in a pile from when they built their house, and made little headstones for each one, you know, Mrs. Robin, Mr. Blackbird, Dr. Grackle, things like that, and we just thought that was pretty good. You know, obviously after a week or two we moved on to something else, but to our chagrin one day we came home from school and Gwen had dug our whole cemetery up. I think the corpses too. We didn't obviously confront her about it, but we thought we needed to get a little more clever with our play if we wanted it to last any longer. So the next thing was we're still playing in Len's junkyard, and we were getting a little more advanced. We were digging trenches now in this gravel area, bringing pieces of pipe back, laying it down, hooking it up to the garden hose, and running water through and creating little ponds. And Gwen seemed to be okay with that. She'd come out and see what we were doing, and she'd say, well, you know, you have to put that stuff back in Len's yard when you're done. And oh yeah, we would do that. So one day we found a big sewer pipe, and we hauled it over and dug a big trench and buried it. And then we found an intact toilet. Didn't have a lid or the insides, but had everything else. We hauled this toilet over and set it over a hole that this sewer pipe was, you know, laid into. And we filled the tank up with water from the hose and plugged up the hole with a float we found. And we each took turns peeing into the toilet, and and pulling up the float and letting the water out and it went down in the hole and down the sewer pipe into our little retention pond we'd built. So we thought that was pretty good. And Brent said, "Hurry up, fill it back up. I've got to poop." And didn't occur to me that he should go in the house and do that. So he was going to do it out there. And we thought for sure this toilet would work just fine. So I filled it up. And he pulled his pants down. And as he was lowering his butt over the toilet, Gwen saw him. And she came screaming out of the house, "Brent, you pull your pants up and you get in this house right away. And Jeff, you go home." And so that was the end of that for that day. And next time we went back there, I guess Mr. Pushing had dismantled our plumbing, so that was the end of our career as plumbers, Bill and John the plumbers. So the next thing was an indoor activity. Obviously in Minnesota you spend about 5 months of the year indoors. However, we spent as much time as we could outdoors in the winter building snow forts, and we'd only come in when we couldn't feel our fingers, nose, and toes anymore. And Mrs. Pushing had a whole bunch of cotton rugs in her entryway, and we'd stand there and defrost a little bit, warm up, and then go back out. But we also started playing in their basement. We decided we were going to establish an insurance company, Bill and John's Insurance Company. My nanny had given me my Papa Ralph's old portable Royal typewriter, and I learned how to type with 2 fingers and a thumb. So we asked about all the different types of insurance, and we were told, vandalism, hail damage, windstorm, liability, fire, theft, etc. And we made up policies for all this stuff. We made a whole folder outlining them all. They cost anywhere from 2 cents to 13 cents. And we went around, sold these to friends and relatives. We didn't actually collect the money, it was just pretend, but we issued all the policies, and it was all very official. And then we asked Brent's dad at the newspaper if he would print us some appointment tickets that we like to have. And one of the guys put something together with our name on and printed it up on the letterpress and glued it together with the stuff that makes it into a pad. And we thought those were so great to have our own appointment slips for our company. And we kept that up for quite a while. Then we moved on a little more to something a little more involved. We were fans of the afternoon show Topper, which was a series that came out in the early 50s, and it was being replayed in the late 50s at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right when we got home from school, and we'd run home every day and watch it together. It was based on the 37 movie about a couple who and their St. Bernard dog who had perished in an avalanche while skiing in Switzerland. And the older couple that bought their house were now living in it, and they were haunting it. And Topper, the man, was the only one who could see them. And of course his wife couldn't. So this created all kinds of funny incidents. And there were a lot of wires used to make things float and levitate. And we just thought that was so neat. So we started setting it up in Pushing's basement and using thread to move things up and down. And then we decided to tape pieces of cardboard to the ceiling so we could operate the threads from the other side. Well, Mrs. Pushing didn't want Scotch tape on her painted ceiling, so she said, "You go over to the Vodheims and do that in their basement. Their basement is old." And she was right, it was. Judy had painted the walls a light color and painted musical notes on. It was her rec room when she was a teenager, and it was pretty much in the same shape. So we went down there, and luckily there was a pipe above the one wall that was the outdoor spigot, and we were able to set up card tables and all our things we wanted to levitate on there, put the threads over the pipe, run them to the other side of the room, and tape them onto some ductwork, and we weren't harming anything. So we got it all set up and practiced, and we would levitate a pen and make it look like it was writing on a tilted tablet. And we took a quart-sized milk carton and put 4-point strings on it, and were able to manipulate it with the strings at the other end of the room to pick it up and pour water out of it into a glass. We had 5 or 6 different stations of things. Some things we just levitated simply, but we would also make things happen, like moving stuff from one place to another. And we'd practice and practice, and then bring Mom and Dad and our friend Dave and B down to watch and see how we did this. And we worked at this for quite a while. Usually there'd be a string that would break and things would come crashing down, but we got better and better at it. We found if we took a needle and sewed the strings or the threads onto the items, that they held up better than with Scotch tape, and it was really quite a show. The next thing was probably closer about fourth grade. We reprised the set of the Lost Planet series. In the last vlog I called it Lost in Space. That was wrong. That was actually a series on TV in the late 60s. Lost Planet was a series done in the 50s, and that was the sort of cheesy one we saw at the movie theater. And there were about 15 episodes, I think, in total, and they just kept showing them over and over, and we loved to watch them. So we wanted to take boxes we got from the Wingate store, paint them silver, and then put lights and gizmos in them, like use our old 45 record player as a motor and our erector set motors, and put spinning spiral wheels on, and it was just going to be really neat. So we were going to start painting these with silver paint in the Pushing's garage, and once again Gwen intervened and said, "You're not painting in our garage, go over to the Bodheims and do that." And Dad really indulged me. He went and bought this silver paint. It was oil-based, and he laid out a piece of cardboard, and he said, "Now you paint on this, don't make a mess, and when you're done, you clean the brushes up in this turpentine." So he showed us how to do that. We painted 8 or 10 boxes, carted them down in our basement, put more card tables up than we had for the Topper show, and created all kinds of what we called contraptions or gizmos. My grandmother gave me a whole bag of old extension cords she'd had from her house in the 30s, and funny looking light bulbs and switches, and with all the things we had at our disposal, we made quite a show out of that. And after a few months, I guess we probably lost interest in it again. So that was the end of that. The next thing we moved into was Bill and John's printing company. My mother had found a little mimeograph machine in the basement of the store that Papa Ralph had used to print postcards to send out specials to his customers on, and she didn't use it anymore. And people nowadays don't even know what a mimeograph machine is. You used a stencil that you could either type on or write on with a stylus, and you laid it over a drum that had inky stuff inside, and then it would print by coming through there. The other form of printing we had, of course, was the ditto machine, which you type things on a ditto master, and a waxy substance stuck on the back, and then you ran that through a machine, and paper that had an aromatic compound on it would cause it to transfer. And that's how all our tests and worksheets were printed when we were kids. And if they were fresh off the ditto machine, you could still smell that duplicating fluid, and we'd always hold the paper up to our nose and sniff it. So this worked like the old mimeograph, which was used by churches for the bulletins and for more formal things, but it was only the size of a postcard. So we decided to do our own newspaper, just like Vern's. We called it the Little Olivia Journal, and we would find something that happened to put in it, or make up a little story or something, and I'd type it up on the typewriter on the stencil, and we'd print them off on little pieces of paper that we, of course, got from the Times Journal office. The guys were always happy to oblige us by cutting us paper just to fit the machine. We'd print off a whole stack of them and put them in a grocery bag in our bikes, and we'd go all over town and put them in all the doorways and mailboxes. In fact, one day some old guy came in the drugstore holding a copy of the Little Olivia Journal, said to my father, "Is your kid doing this, or you tell him he can't put this in my mailbox?" And my dad sort of smiled and told me the story, but didn't tell me to stop. We had been paid in the past to go around town and hand out sale handbills, usually for Wingates, that were printed by the Times Journal, and usually Dad put an insert in for his drugstore, and we were paid probably 25 cents an hour to do it, but we knew how to canvass the town with handbills, so we did it. Then we moved on to printing money. That was the most fun thing. we were stamp collectors by then, and we had access to various styles of what things should look like, and I think we had some foreign bills, and I laid the stencil over this and traced out all the artwork in a Mexican 1 peso note. And we made money from Fiji Island and from Germany and from a former Italian colony called Ultra Juba, which is actually part of Somalia nowadays, where all the insurrectionists are, and many other places. And we had fun. We put food coloring in the red ink to turn it brown, and we made two-tone money, and we'd print stacks and stacks of this on the little mimeograph machine. And then we moved up a notch, and we went down to the paper office, and Vern would let us play down there and print little things. And so we decided we were going to print money on the letterpress. So we got a chase out and got all the loose type, and we looked around for some sort of artwork. We found a DeSoto car emblem, so we made the money from the country of DeSoto and set it all up, be the size of a dollar bill. And in the chase, you had to put everything in there and then have spacers on the sides, because you took a crank and turned it to tighten all the type in there. You had to do this very carefully, because if you didn't have everything balanced out with the right spacers, when you cranked it, it would pie, which means it would explode like this and all the type would fly all over the place. And when that happened to us once. So after that, we had Mr. Eskelson, who worked there. His daughter was in my class, in fact. And he lived in the Pushing's old house on the north side. He rented it with his wife. We had him check our chase and make sure we had balanced it out right before we cranked the sides down to tighten it. And then we'd go put it in the letterpress. And it was a big machine that had a printing plate like this, and it came down like that, went back and forth, and you could set the thing to go fast or slow. Vern was afraid we were going to pinch our fingers in it, so he unplugged it and he said, now you have to turn the wheel with your hands and do it manually. And it took about 20 seconds to print one thing doing it that way, because you really had to patty cake that wheel fast. So we would do that while he was standing there, and then when he went back in the office, we'd plug it back in and we'd print it the normal way. And you could set the lever so it didn't print too fast, and we just put the piece of paper down on the pins, and it would print, take it off, and put the next one. And we printed stacks and stacks of different types of money there. The purpose of this was Bill and John were going to bury some treasure, and this was going to happen out at Green Lake behind our house. So in the summer, the Pushings rented a cottage for a week on the north side. I'd go over there in the boat and pick Brent up. He'd come over to my house, and then he'd even come out and stay with me by himself for a week too, some years. We got all this money together. We built a treasure chest about the size of 4 shoe boxes. We carted it way back into the woods behind our house through all the nettle and the mosquitoes, and it was kind of moist back there. And we found a high spot. We dug a big hole and put our treasure chest down. We marked the tree. We made a treasure map so we could find it and dig it up again in the future. And a year later, we had enough money printed up again from the 2 processes down at the paper and in the little mimeograph machine, that we had another treasure chest ready. So we took that out to a little swampy lake behind Green Lake called Jesse Lake. There was a little road that you could walk down. You really couldn't drive a car on it much anymore. And we went and buried that one too. And when I once said, you know, our organized play continued into our teen years, I said 14. Actually, it continued till we were 17, because when I was 17 and got my license after we came back from Europe the year before, I couldn't get it till the fall because we were in Europe when I turned 16. The following summer, Brent came out and I could drive then. I drove the car over to Jesse Lake and we went and dug that treasure up too. So by 5th grade, Mom had started me stamp collecting, and she called up Gwen and said, I'm going to start Jeff stamp collecting, to give her a heads up to go get Brent a stamp collecting kit too, and so she did. And we started collecting stamps together and buying these big packets down at the local hardware store and trading the duplicates back and forth. And then Brent found out that his classmate Dave Hammer had started collecting on his own, and based on a little collection his father had made for his Boy Scout badge. And so then I met Dave through stamp collecting, and the three of us collected stamps and traded back and forth. Dave never became part of our play projects. He came over and saw what we did, but Brent and I kept that totally between ourselves. That was really something that was long-lived back to our childhood. But Dave became a good friend, and obviously, eventually, later in my life, in 2010, I helped him out and moved to Mexico with him. So we were friends for life. Even in about 7th grade, Brent and I were still doing newspapers. We established Bill and John's Olivia Stamp News, and we started making a stamp newsletter. I typed it up on a ditto master, and we would take it down to the grade school principal's secretary. I was in 7th grade, Brent was in 6th, and we would give her 10 or 15 cents, and she'd print us 20 or 30 copies, like for a half cent each on the ditto machine. We'd fold them up and mail them to everybody that we knew. So that's probably not everything that we did as kids that was creative, but that's a good bulk of it. And we just had a great childhood being very creative. Obviously now I'm moving into junior high, and within a couple of years, Brent would be getting in close to senior high and having an interest in girls, and our stuff like this kind of tapered off, but we were still good friends, and got together in the summer at the lake and palled around, and but I could see by the time I was in 10th and 11th grade and he was in 9th and 10th grade that his interests were moving away from stamp collecting and all the stuff we did, and he was getting an interest in girls, and I thought, I should have an interest in girls too, but admittedly, the only thing I had interest in was, seeing my classmates in the changing room at Phi Ed class, so I didn't quite know what that was all about at that time, but eventually I figured it out. I think the next vlog will be about the 3 great trips that Mom and Dad took me on during my childhood that were very educational, and I was very thankful that they were able to afford to do that and give me that experience.